Now, a Sussex school this week announced they would not be changing their gender-neutral uniform policy, banning the wearing of skirts, despite protests from students and parents on the first day of term. The news comes in the same week a BBC film used as a teaching resource in some primary schools came in for criticism for suggesting there could be more than 100 gender identities. Critics say that some conversations around gender identity can be confusing and damaging to children, while others say it's vital to address these issues to increase understanding and support for children who are struggling with their identity. Well, here to discuss those issues are psychotherapist Bob Withers, co-founder of Trans Equality Legal Initiative, Tara Hewitt, activist and writer Farhan Khan, and still with us is Angela Epstein. Tara, how well do you think society understands the term gender identity?
I think that we've seen so much in the media that awareness that we have more than two gender identities is definitely out there. I don't think you can be not aware of that. We've seen stories every other week in the national press, on TV.
But is it interpreted in the right way in the press and the media? Do people really
get
to grips with it?
And that's sort of what I'd say. I think the challenges are that there's still too many myths when we talk about this issue, and I think that's what often leads to the backlash, because actually people don't have the facts or the information. And it's really important that we have shows like today so that we can actually educate and make sure that people understand that it's about making sure that young people are supported to be themselves at school, rather than imposing anything on them. It's about creating an environment where people can be them, and surely that's what education's about.
And Angela, one of the key things is that the biological sex that you're born with is different to what the gender that you identify with. And when you think of it like that, identity is a very personal thing. That BBC film does make a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Not to me, it doesn't. I think that it's entirely mutually exclusive to suggest that sex and gender are two separate things. People are either born a man or a woman. Now, I understand that people may have different attitudes towards their sexuality. Just because I'm a woman, I don't necessarily have to be attracted to just women, or I'm attracted to women and men, or I'm attracted to neither.
But you're talking about sexuality there, aren't you?
But I think they are inextricably linked. And what I have a big problem with this whole conversation is there is a moral panic that is raging across the country, which the establishment are too scared to fight back against. I understand that, listen, I'm a parent. Children can be confused about their sexuality, they can be confused about life. There's all sorts of different things that make them feel one day one thing and one day another. But this tiny minority has become so vocal that it is gifting a whole generation of children who may have confusion about just being an adolescent, about lots of other things. We're giving them the language and a conversation to say, well, you must be one of these 100 things. And I think all it's going to do is we will see down the generations the terrible harm it could happen as a consequence.
Farhan, a moral panic?
I think that's an exaggeration. And confusion, no, I disagree with you. In fact, I would go as far as to say there aren't 100 genders. There are maybe 7 billion unique genders, one for every single individual on the planet. We do not need to be linked to this idea that you are assigned a certain gender at birth and that you have to live this life based on that gender you have been assigned. These choices should be made by the individual themselves. And instead of confusing children, this will empower children.
But you say 7 billion gender identities. Isn't it just that we need to stop being so rigid about what a man and a woman is? It's
Absolutely.
just a broad spectrum within that, but they're not 7 billion identities.
Well, there are 7 billion people on the planet, so that's why there are 7 billion gender identities on this planet. Because, like you said, it's a continuum. It's a gender, it's a spectrum. You don't just have a masculine identity and you live a masculine life. You can, because a doctor assigned you that at birth, you can be somewhere along the spectrum between what is considered to be.
But just thinking about the moral panic, I absolutely agree. There is a moral panic being created. We saw in the media Boris Johnson actually polling about using trans issues as a culture war. So actually the issue isn't that trans people are creating a moral panic. It's those people that are opposing trans rights, which are trying to create. But as is the Prime Minister coming out saying that he wanted to maybe use it as a culture war. That's the language of moral panic, not the language which is talking about including people and trying to make people feel comfortable.
Okay. Sorry, we have to be vocal because otherwise we will be silenced.
Yeah. No, OK, let's get Bob in here. But Bob, let's talk about children. What is the potential psychological impact on telling children that they have more than 100 identities to choose from?
Well, one of the problems that I'm very concerned about is that there's been a huge increase in the number of children seeking medical transition. So the Tavistock Clinic has this year received about 2,600 children in their gender identity clinic. About 41% of those people are put onto a medical pathway. So we're having literally over 1,000 kids put on medication. And the problem is that if they feel that psychological problems are going to be resolved by this medical treatment, we're storing up a real problem for the future.
And we're just giving them choice?
Well, I think one of the problems is that we're not really exposing children to a balanced education about biology, first of all. I mean, it's quite common for a kid to think that when they grow up, they're going to grow a penis if they're a little girl. When I was little, I used to think I was going to be able to have babies. So there's something about basic biological education which helps children realise something about their biology, and gender identity on top of that, if you do that too young, is quite confusing for some kids. And also, just let me finish, the other thing I'm a bit concerned about is if we just have one story, the policy can get captured. I think it's really important that we're having a discussion here today from different perspectives, because if there's only one agenda being promoted in schools or in therapy or in the law, then we're getting a push in a particular direction which I worry encourages children to go down this medical pathway.
And Tara, that is a very good point, isn't it? When people speak out against maybe the trans, what people would say is the trans agenda, they are shouted down and they're accused to be bigoted. And that is an issue, isn't it, if we can't have a general conversation outside of the studio?
I'm a bit of a girly swat, and so for me, I like to look at the evidence and the statistics.
Me
If
too.
we look at Christine Olsen's work from the University of Washington, which shows clearly that actually if we work with young people, we can identify those young people who have got a profound sense of who they are, and actually by not allowing them to be who they are will actually cause them immense harm, causing high rates of self-harm, high rates of suicide. And there's a research project out this week that shows us from Harvard that had 27,000 trans people involved in that survey that showed that conversion therapy for trans people increases the rates of suicide. So for me, this is about harm. This is about making sure that we're working on facts. And I'd say the medical profession aren't with you. And I'd like us to work with where the medical profession is now rather than with minority opinions.
All right, okay, so...
And let's be careful not to just throw reports at each other, because that's not...
I mean, I could get scientific, but if you actually look at the evidence in these reports, a lot of them very, very poor. They're very poorly founded.
Well, 27,000 people is quite a lot.
They don't rule out the possibility that if you're actually affirmed and you're accepted in a group and you get a sense of identity, that's what makes you feel better. We're social beings. We like to be part of a group.
Okay.
We like to have a sense of identity. It doesn't necessarily mean that conceptualising this as a problem that will be solved by medical treatment is actually helpful.
Farhan, let's talk about Sam Smith, because he has said that he wants to be referred to as they or them, not he or him. He's non-binary. It's something he struggled with for a while. Is that a good thing? Is that a good message for young people?
I think it's very empowering for young people to see a non-binary hero like... well, I say hero in the non-binary sense, you know. I think heroine is a different word.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It's a stumbling block. You say hero, and then you suddenly think, well, hang on.
No, but this is the thing. So I think it's so empowering for young people to see that they don't have to ascribe themselves to one particular gender binary notion of gender, male or female. They can have a choice and look at someone as talented and as brilliant as Sam Smith and full of compassion that, you know, he's done this. They've done this, rather, sorry. And then, yeah, so they've also got Alok Vedmanon and lots of other wonderful non-binary activists to the fore as well on Twitter.
OK, let's find out what people are saying at home. Ria?
Thanks, Sean. Lots of people getting involved today. Elizabeth on Twitter says, when I was at school, I'd have hated a ban on skirts. I always hated trousers and wanted to look feminine. Why can't males and females be proud of their difference instead of trying to look the same? George on Facebook says, children don't care about such things. It's only adults projecting their own insecurities onto kids. Nellie says, I spent my entire childhood desperate to be a boy. I dressed as a boy, played with boys and would have given anything for a current sex change treatment. However, I'm so grateful I was left alone. Like 80% of similar children, I changed. It's gender norms that are the problem, not the child. And Mark adds, we're conditioned to act like a stereotypical boy or girl from the minute we're born. It's about time we try to break down this artificial pigeonholing of people. And finally, Latta says, if we're going to be gender neutral, why is it that the female's attire is the one that's discarded? Maybe every child, regardless of their gender, should wear a skirt as part of their school uniform.
It is an interesting point. Angela, Mark, I think, made that point about we're conditioned to act in a certain way as soon as we're born. This is giving kids an option, isn't it? We
just have to look at the science. We're not, with the greatest respect for him, we're not designated that gender or sex when we're born. As soon as you conceive, as soon as that embryo starts to develop, you are gifted either a set of reproductive organs that define you as male or as female, and the same hormonal cauldron that goes with it. And I've been through childbirth 4 times, so I do know about it.
You can't deny that,
hang on, let me just make. Can I make the point? So the point is that when you arrive on this planet with a whole hormonal cauldron, as I say, then it's going to orientate the way that you behave. Sexuality is one thing. There are people, as I said, who made this. The caller that said that she couldn't face being a boy, but she grew out of it. People feel all sorts of things about their sexuality, but when it comes to the baseline fact, there are boys and there are girls. And the point that you make about 7 billion people, there are 7 billion people that may feel different every single day of the week. Why do we have to label that and commodify it and make it into this militant talking point which confuses children when it doesn't need to be?
What's age appropriate? When should children be talking about this sort of thing? Shouldn't it be adults talking? I mean, adults find it confusing enough, as we do.
Can I just start by saying you've already labelled people as male and female, so you do start off with labels.
Biology did.
Sorry.
I'm not arguing with the science.
But there's all these ramifications. So can I finish now? I've given you time to speak.
But I'm just giving you an opportunity to understand
So the thing is, right, the problem isn't that you've got these labels, it's the expectations based on these labels, that by being male, you have to ascribe to this toxic masculine kind of... You do. There is this societal pressure to do all of this, to be the strong, confident type. I was laughed at for playing with Barbie dolls when I was a child.
But you're entitled to do that.
Bob,
can I just say, I think there's something really empowering about celebrating gender diversity. You know, it's really good to see Farhan here expressing, you know, who they are. And I think the same thing with Sam Smith. I think we maybe can agree on that, and we probably can also agree that stopping kids from wearing skirts who want to wear skirts is a crazy thing, isn't it?
I mean, you take it back to the school, stopping girls who want to wear skirts.
I absolutely agree, and I think one of the challenges is where people do these issues without any proper advice, without any proper support. We shouldn't be getting rid of things. We should be increasing choice. So that school shouldn't have banned skirts. It should have just got rid of the gender labels off the uniforms and allowing young people to wear whatever they wanted within the uniform code that they had as a school.
Well, it's a really good debate, and I'm sure it will run and run in the press. It's great to talk to you all. Thanks very much indeed. For details of organisations which offer advice and support with gender identity, go online to bbc.co.uk/actionline.